This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by OWC, JZ Microphones, Spectra 1964, Atom Audio, and Isotope. You're hearing my voice right now on a JZ pop filter and BB29 microphone through the Spectra 1964 STX100D mic pre and Isotope RX and Ozone, all recorded safely onto an OWC SSD. So get ready to rock.
I'm a big fan of recording a whole band at once. There's some magic that happens when you get that interaction with the whole band. And there's, happy accidents that can happen, which I totally love. I really get off on that on when a band comes into my studio and plays live. It's just, that's what makes tracking fun. Which doesn't make it fun is when you have to track one instrument at a time and build it.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. No matter where you like to rock in the galaxy, the OWC Envoy Pro Electron lets you record with confidence over USB-C with up to more than a gigabyte per second real-world performance. Transfer tracks in seconds and take your sessions with you wherever you go. Built for reliability, the OWC Envoy Pro Electron is waterproof, dustproof, and crush-proof. Find the new OWC Envoy Pro Electron and all your storage needs at maxsales.com/rockstars. If you're ready to discover the secrets to making your mixes sound great no matter what your studio situation, then check out my free mixing course, mixmasterbundle.com, where I show you how to get great sounding mixes in your studio using simple techniques and free plugins. And when you're ready for more advanced studio skills, then check out recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy, where you can learn from Grammy-winning teachers to help you record, edit, mix, and master your best record ever. Use the code Rockstar right now at checkout for 10% off any course for a limited time. Hey Rockstars, it's your host Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Jaimeson Durr, a San Francisco Bay Area top Billboard charting recording engineer, mixer, and producer that works on a variety of music genres from legends like Sammy Hagar and his band The Circle, Chickenfoot, Megadeth, Joe Satriani, The Dead, Don Felder of the Eagles, The Head and the Heart, Dan the Automator, as well as many other promising artists. Jaimeson works out of some of the best Bay Area recording studios, primarily works out of his own studio, Wally's HydeOut, in the legendary Hyde Street Recording Studio complex in San Francisco since 2004. It's a classic studio where many well-known artists have recorded, like Santana, Creedence Clearwater Revival, Jefferson Airplane, The Grateful Dead, Green Day, Train, and many more. Jaimeson has also performed on and mixed several songs for hit prime TV shows and movie trailers, shows like 90210, The Mindy Project, Ugly Betty, Rango, Arthur, The Lorax, Tangled, and others. He's also a Waves audio artist who continually develops new presets for their plugins. With over 24 years of experience as a professional engineer, Jaimeson has a passion for the craft of making great timeless records that live forever. I like that. Thanks also so much to John Cuniberti for making our introduction. Thank you, John, once again. Please welcome Jaimeson Durr to Recording Studio Rockstars. Jaimeson, are you ready to rock, dude?
I am ready to rock.
That's cool to meet you, man. And again, thank you to John, who was a lot of fun to have on the show, talking about his one mic recordings. Did you ever do any of those with John?
I did not have the pleasure of doing it, but I watched a lot of those videos on YouTube, and they're done so well.
Yeah, I always wondered about that. I felt like there's a lot of effort that just goes into getting everything ready to make some music.
Yeah, and I listened to his podcast and how he had to, shift people closer and farther away. It's a whole different technique, and I have a lot of respect for him, as an engineer. He was a mentor for me. But I like that, he's recorded every format, used all these mics, doing these bands, and now he's going down just to one mic.
Yeah,
which I think is
exactly.
awesome. It's just like, wow, like you needed more challenges in your life. But I think it's great that he's doing that. It's really awesome.
Once you know all the mics, then
Yeah,
focus on one of them.
one mic to rule them all.
So now, John also introduced me to Justin Phelps, who recently did an interview with, and that is somebody else that you know as well.
Yes, I know Justin very well. We were really good friends. He was the house engineer at this studio called Coast Recorders,
right,
in downtown San Francisco. It's since gone away. It went away during the .com era, and so he was the house engineer there, and I started interning there, and I eventually worked my way up, and then just started assisting him, and then once the studio closed, then we kind of went to our own homes to keep working because we didn't have a studio to work out of. Then we decided, like, well, we got to get out of our house. We can't be working in our house because the neighbors are complaining. I think we were both living in apartments at the time, so it's kind of hard to have a recording studio in an apartment, and can't work really after like 5 or 6 when people get home from work. So, so we found a little spot in San Francisco where we set up a little room. And it was this cool studio. It was called Closer. And they had a main studio where they did all, it's just a proper studio. And then we rented one of the rooms down the hall, which was, I guess, used to be like an office building. So it was like an office. So we shared that. It was kind of funny, this little room, and there wasn't really room for a couch or anything. So we had beanbags in there.
Nice.
And clients just sat on beanbags in the corner, and we had this, desk with a DAW on it, and just worked out of there. And we'd either do overdubs in the room or we'd stick them out in the hallway and do that, and then just do mixing and overdubs there. And then we came into a really unique situation. Back when we were working at Coast, Bob Weir had come in to record, and we got to be good friends with his engineer, who was Mike McGinn. And Mike's been working for Bob for years and years. And he was sitting on a bunch of Bob's gear that he had put in storage, because I guess Bob used to have a studio, and he closed it down, put all this gear in storage. And then Mike told Justin and I, it's like, hey, if you guys can find a place to, a studio to put this stuff in, like we can, you can use this gear indefinitely. And, we had a big analog console, some tape machines, bunch of nice mics, and a credenza full of a bunch of outboard gear. So it was like everything you need for a studio. And so then we were looking around the Bay Area to try to find a space. And we looked at all these different places. Some we were going to have to build from the ground up. And then we found Hyde Street. So there was a room available there, which was Studio C. So it's a classic room. And I think you read that in the bio of everybody that's recorded there. So it's got some deep history. But it was interesting, at the time that we moved in, the only room that was available was the control room of Studio C. And we thought, well, this is an upgrade from the office. So it was nice to actually get into a proper control room. And then we had, the big analog console, some tape machines, outboard gear, and mics. And so we just, did overdubs in that room. What they had done is we didn't have access to the live room because at the time they were renting that out. So they had put plywood up over the glass of the control room, so you couldn't see into the live room. And then
renting it out as in like a totally different kind of office or something.
Well, yeah, there was other like little production rooms.
Okay.
There was an outfit called Hieroglyphics that were working out of there. They were doing like hip hop music. And so they just had a couple of Pro Tools rigs out there, and, just doing overdubs in the same room, and doing that. And then probably, I don't know, a few months later, those guys ended up moving out, and the managers of the studio asked us, like, hey, this room's available. Do you want to take it over? And we're like, hell yes, we do. So we ended up getting that whole live room back. And then at the time, so it's Justin and I are partners in reopening Studio C. So that's, kind of the history up to that point, with Justin.
Right on.
And then we were partners for several years, and then he had moved to Portland, a few years later. But Yeah, I think he was really instrumental in getting that place and getting us in there. He kind of has just that attitude of just like, let's go for it. Let's just do this. And I thought that was craziest thing I could ever do. It's like, open a recording studio.
And then you also know our mutual friend, Matt Boudreau over at Working Class Audio, right?
Yes. Yeah. And he had a studio as well. And he'll probably tell you the story, where he had Broken Radio, which was another kind of legendary studio in San Francisco, which it was under a different name. Oh, so it was Coast, like the studio I worked at, but it was across town. But I think they'd actually named that studio Toast to be kind of in competition. So people get confused. It's like, wait, was it Coast or was it Toast?
Oh, that's hilarious.
And then when Coast closed, Toast was Toast, and then they took the name back as Coast, which then another engineer had moved in there. Besides Matt was also roommates with
was it Romanowski?
Yeah. Yes, Michael Romanowski, which actually I believe he's kept the name Coast Mastering. And then that studio eventually closed, and then he recently built a space in his house. But yeah, great people. The Bay Area community is very small, and everybody's just awesome here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's really interesting to hear you talk about these different histories of studios and the phases of people going from one place to another.
Yep.
Just because the whole process of like creating a studio and creating something that wasn't there before, and taking that leap of faith, it's pretty fascinating. I'm doing a studio redesign right now. I have a home studio here in Nashville, and
right. I've heard all about it.
Yeah. And then of course
you've had with that.
Yeah, we went through quite a lot of struggles in 2020 to get a new law passed, which we did.
Great.
Hurrah, hurrah. And I'm just sort of fixing it up and improving it, so that I can mix better in there and record better and putting up treatments and stuff. So I'm really excited about it too.
That's awesome.
Now you're still working out of Wally's Hideout now, and that's your main place, or no?
Yes, it is. I'm still there after 17 years, since 2004. So I'm, pretty proud of that. I've seen a lot of stuff come and go, and there was a point where I've had a lot of different partners. I'm the only original partner from 2004. Justin had left, and there was another intern of ours that kind of moved up, and then he eventually became a partner. I've seen this pattern where we get interns in that become assistants that become partners.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like the evolution. You start at a recording studio, scrubbing toilets, and then you eventually work your way up to head engineer, if you can stick it out.
Now, I wouldn't want to put you on the spot about specifics, but can you share any insights into that? How do you, I understand how you go from intern to engineer and start working on stuff,
right.
But how do you go from not partner to partner, and what have you learned about the ways that things like that can happen and make sense for people? If people are like, man, I'd really love to, I'd love to have a partnership with a couple other engineers and share a studio together.
Right. Well, I think what it comes down to is when you start working your way up, then you start getting your own clients, and then all of a sudden you start booking that studio more often. And then so you're contributing to like the income of the studio. And so we just get to a point where we're like, well, how about you become a partner? And then that way, if they've got, they want to be there more, they want to contribute to the group and be there. They kind of prove their worth. And then, they're usually, buy some gear is a contribution to it, because myself, I was kind of leading up to where Justin had left, and then we had another partner come in, this guy Scott. And so it was just Scott and I. Then we, added on another partner, and then each partner that comes in like buys gear, and that's just kind of how you buy in.
Right.
So I already had a lot of gear invested into the studio. Eventually, all that Bob Weir gear had left, and then so we had to scramble to buy more gear.
Bob, come on, Bob.
Yeah, I know. Bob ended up opening his own place called
cool.
TRI, Tamil Pious Research Industries, or whatever it is stands for. And it's kind of a trip, because I went over to his studio and went into one of the rooms, and it looked exactly like my studio did back in the early 2000s. He had all the same gear. The gear in the rack was the same. It never moved. So you walked in, it was the same console, same, rack of gear, same tape machine. It was kind of a weird step back in time. But yeah, back to the partner thing. It's just, it's good to have people who want to be in a community and be a part of the studio and contribute to it.
Well, I think there's some different ways that we look at a studio situation. I think when we start, we're just like, I'm just recording, I'm working with the band, they're paying money. Somebody's name is on the lease and you're paying the rent.
Yeah.
Or you're doing it in your home or whatever. And then at some point you might have a space that you're sharing with other people. But again, everybody's just kind of working on it. Maybe there's just a name up. But I mean, if you're talking about, we may be talking about it. There's a business attached to the name of the studio, and it's actually an entity, a business entity. And in those situations, if you want to have partnerships, then you have to act. There's sort of an official process to that, right?
Yes. I don't know how official it really is. It's,
okay.
I think once one guy comes on, the studio kind of knows that there's somebody else that's responsible for it. I think, I'm on the original lease there.
Right.
But, when they send the billing out, they end up just putting everybody on there.
Yeah.
And, having the partners, helps to pay the bills. I don't know that one person works so much that they can afford to do that. Although at one point Justin was like really busy. He's a hustler. So, he had the studio booked up a lot. But we always looked at it as a good problem. Like if the studio is so booked that we can't get in there, we have to go book other rooms, then that's a good problem to have. Then our business is doing good. But I would say over the years, it's worked out to where we've made some money, we've had to pay out some money, but overall, it seems to be profitable enough to keep it going. And
yeah.
It is really all about having the right partners because you want them to pull their own weight and to book things, because if we come up short, well, then they've got to pitch in out of pocket, which just kind of sucks. It's like, well, you could have just booked another session and then that would have covered the rent. So
yeah. Well, I mean, I have a friend here who's done a partnership in a studio where it was essentially just a handshake agreement for, taking over the lease for a period of time or part of it. So I guess that can work in a lot of situations. And I know, the arrangements can be as simple as for every session you bring in, some of it goes to the studio, some of it goes to you. And it's just, and that might work for people.
Yeah. Yeah, it works great because we have a shared calendar online. It's just first come, first serve. And then we have just a daily rate. We usually just do half days or whole days.
With so many game-changing iZotope plugins to choose from, deciding which one to buy next could be a bit of a challenge. But did you know that now you can have all their plugins through iZotope's new affordable subscription bundle, Music Production Suite Pro, for only $19.99 per month? Get your Rockstar extended 30-day free trial subscription now at iZotope.com/rockstars and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. Do you need to record direct stereo keyboards? Spectra 1964 now offers the Stereo BBDI2 with custom wound high-Z transformers for big headroom, virtually flat response, and a 15 dB input pad. The Spectra 1964 BBDI passive direct box is also perfect for recording deep bass that will make your mixes sound huge. Plug that into a C610 complementer, and as founder Bill Cheney points out, it'll move your pant leg. Get your sound moving at Spectra1964.com. Are there challenges or solutions to saying like, okay, the gear needs maintenance, so this is a new expense?
Yes, that's actually a very good question. So whatever gear anybody buys, with their own money and contributes to the studio, then it's then covered with the studio profits to get it fixed. So if something breaks down. So we try to always keep things fixed and not like, oh, dude, I don't have the money to fix, this $3,000 compressor. I guess it's just dead. So, we try to keep up on the maintenance, and we're fortunate enough that there's some guys in the building that do maintenance. There's a shop downstairs.
Is that the name of their company, Doo Maintenance?
Did I say that?
No, it was just a funny twist on the sentence there.
No, where they do maintenance.
I'm just kidding. I'm extending an apology to your friends right now. I just a stupid Lidge joke right there.
Oh, it's all good, man.
Yeah, cool.
It is great to have those guys, and you can just say, "Hey, this thing's broken. You think you can fix it? Yeah, sure. Just put it on the bench." Because they have downstairs. They have another studio, their main studio, which is Studio A, and they have a big vintage Neve console there that needs constant maintenance. So there's like full-time staff that's just there fixing it. So it's nice to have guys there.
Yeah, I can picture funny conversations like, dude, you always want to fix your gear first, man. But right. No, it's cool. And I mean, I can see how, I mean, maintenance is a thing, right? It's part of having a studio. And it's like, even the things that you think will never break, I just had my Avid HD 192 interface, like of all things, channels 7 and 8 crapped out, It's
that happened on one of mine. It was 5 and 6.
There you go. It's like some kind of stereo pair input. So now I got to fix that, So, the computer breaks, everything breaks.
Yeah, and it does. And there's even like software things. And I'm kind of the guy that goes in and kind of troubleshoots all that. We just upgraded our system to a Burl mothership with the SoundGrid connection, and SoundGrid is a whole different thing when you're connecting your interface.
Is that the Waves
Ethernet
SoundGrid?
Yeah. When you're connecting it via Ethernet, you're just like, is this really going to work? Because I'm used to the whole DigiLink cable thing, which is a little more solid of a cable. But so far, it's solid and it works, and we can run Ethernet lines through the building and link stuff up. So it's been working. It's been working pretty good.
Well, let's pivot to that for just a sec. What is SoundGrid, and what's the? I know Ethernet for running AVB signals around the studio, right. And what's really funny is I sort of discovered that again. I feel like Focusrite sort of introduced us again to the RedNet idea a while ago, and then AVB is a thing, and then I discovered that it had been around forever. Like it was always there or something.
It's definitely the future. I just hate that there's all these different protocols because there's there's Dante, and then there's the AVB, and then there's RedNet, and then Wave SoundGrid. So it's
but essentially it's using Ethernet to send digital signals.
Yeah,
around.
It's the same connection. We went with the SoundGrid because I'm a Waves artist.
Yeah.
And also we like their technology because it's kind of like the UA thing where you can, the Apollo thing where you can put plugins in and record those through your chain.
Oh, cool. So it sort of cuts down on latency to be able to record through plugins.
Yeah. And you have to have a DSP server. So all the processing's going on in an external box. So
cool.
it's like the UAD thing, really. It's just their take on it.
Yeah, I've never, I don't, what's interesting is I just don't have any idea what that sounds like, because if I tried it, it would have some significant latency. And so I wouldn't really be hearing the effect.
Right.
But if you have a system like that, you can hear it, in near real time or almost instantaneously, and actually enjoy recording through all those plugins.
Right. Because it's nice. We have a bunch of, outboard preamps, and we don't necessarily have all the EQs we want. So I can pick and choose, whether I want a Neve or an API or something like that going in, or a little compression, then we can hit that. So it's kind of nice when you want to, print that stuff and just commit to it, which is nice.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So then you've got the Wave SoundGrid going on, which means it's an external box that's doing the plugin processing for you while you're mixing, but it's also a way to route audio throughout different rooms of the studio?
It is, yeah. You actually don't need the DSP server to do that. That's just for the plugins. And it's nice for mixing too, because you can offload some processing power, when you're mixing, the Waves plugins at least. And then some plugin alliance too are in there as well. And whoever else, would want to subscribe to the SoundGrid system. It's not just for Waves. But yeah, it does allow you to network other things. So we actually have in the live room, we needed more headphone sends out there. So I repurposed our old 192s and stuck them out there. And there's like kind of a box that translates it from SoundGrid to the old DigiLink connection. And then so we can have other outputs out there as well as other inputs, so that you can use the 192 as other inputs out there. So it's kind of a nice system to expand upon.
Interesting.
Doing that. And then our goal is at some point, send Ethernet downstairs to Studio A and be able to track something from there too.
Okay, I see. So you could have whole interfaces, another 24 ins and outs in a totally distant part of the studio.
Yeah, which is, there's probably a length limitation which kind of baffles me. That it's just like, how can this be running so fast through this cable? It's just this little tiny cable.
Yeah, I know. The Ethernet thing really blows my mind when I mess around with it.
Yeah, it's definitely the future.
That's cool. Okay, well, why don't we pivot a little bit and we'll talk about some of the stuff you've been recording recently. Of course, this episode will come out later than we record it, but you did a project. You've been working with Sammy Hagar a bunch, and I know you guys did some pretty cool stuff in 2020.
We did. So, it's been killing the band. I've been working with Sammy for about 12 years now. And, he loves playing live. Anytime he can get out there to play live, he loves it. He just lives for it. The guy's in his early 70s, and you wouldn't know it from seeing him on stage and bounce around and just kind of the personality is, if anybody knows him and sees him on TV or on interviews on the internet or whatever, that's him. That's his personality. He's just really upbeat. So, when the pandemic hit, it was really killing him not to be able to be creating music and putting it out there. So there actually was their video producer that had the idea of, well, let's try this, remote recording thing. And what they would do is they would use their iPhones and they would record themselves, playing a song, and then send that to the next guy, and then just keep adding parts up till they actually had a song. It's a little more complicated than that. Mm-hmm. They had to actually send them to me. And the crazy thing is because there's no syncing at all when you're recording, when Michael Anthony's in LA recording his bass and vocals, and then Jason Bonham is in Florida recording his thing, and then Sammy's here and trying to, sync all those up. So I just start with the drums and then bring the bass in. So I have to manually align everything. So it's kind of up to me, like, to how the performance is. Like, they have no idea what it sounds like until I mix it.
Wow.
And align all the tracks. But it's it's good to know that they're all cover songs. There was one original song. That was the first one. But all the others are covers or
yeah, you guys did a rockin' version of Won't Get Fooled Again.
Yeah.
By The Who.
And so, it's nice to have that reference. It's like, okay, I know where the timing of this goes and where this is supposed to sit, but it kind of makes a fun challenge to kind of create that groove. And you have musicians of that caliber. It doesn't matter what they record on. It's going to sound good. The performance comes through over the recording quality.
So let's back up a little bit. Let's geek out on some of the specifics of, so it sounds like this idea of sending it over from iPhone and sending it. What I love about that is it sounds like, wow, this is keeping it super simple. Yeah. But how would they have done that so that we could imagine doing that, or with our own band that's scattered all over the world or country?
Right. Well, it will usually start with Jason on drums. So he will know the song and he'll either play to the pre-recorded version of it, or he'll just have the arrangement in his head, the song form, and know what goes where. Sometimes I'll have to edit it if they want to go shorter or longer on parts. And
he's got some sort of home studio set up to be able to record drums.
He does, and it's actually quite interesting because before, I think he usually has a guy like help him record at home. He's got a home studio that's pretty good. He's got some nice stuff. And but in the beginning, he was just his iPhone. He'd just put it out in front of his drum kit and just play. And in some of the early recordings, I really had to work some magic to get the iPhone to sound like Bonham drums. It's just like, how am I going to do this?
Well, just an iPhone mic just out in front of the drum kit. Yeah, that's a challenge.
I actually have a preset coming out for that where it does that, and it's like night and day. I'm going to put up a video of it. It's just like, I can't believe I did it just through a string of plugins that I figured out to just make it. So if anybody's recording drums in their iPhones, I think I might have a preset that'll.
Oh, hell yeah. Preset for a particular plugin or no?
Well, it's a Waves plugin.
Okay.
So it may be out by the time this thing airs.
I see. Something cool.
But what it really is, I can tell you this, they have a thing called Studio Rack, and it's just a chain of plugins.
Oh, cool.
It's in there. So you can stack a bunch of Waves plugins in there. And so I just figured out the right combination to do that, to make it sound awesome.
It's called the iPhoner, the de-iPhoner.
Yeah, exactly. But then, Jason finally got it together and got the multi-track recording thing, I had to do some Zoom stuff with him so I could walk him through on setting stuff and he has a rack of preamps, so I had to tell him, okay, turn this one up, turn that one down. It's kind of hard to do it over the internet. It'd be so much easier if I was there. So he finally got it, and then it's starting to sound great. And he has Pro Tools, so he just records everything into Pro Tools, uploads it to Dropbox. I download it, sweeten it up, edit whatever I have to do, and then send that off to usually to Sammy, and then he'll put either guitar or vocals on that, or I'll go to Vic Johnson, who's his guitar player, and he'll add his part on it. And then, last we'll usually put Michael Anthony, the bass, and then his backup vocals on it. And then, so I'm just kind of syncing it up and then sending it to the next guy. And then they add their part, and then I get that, input that into Pro Tools, line it up, edit it. Sammy will usually do a few vocal takes, and then I have to comp from that. And, Sammy's mostly just recording on his iPhone, and that makes it really challenging.
Just into the iPhone mic.
Just into the iPhone mic. There's a couple songs where we actually did in the studio. If you watch the last one we did that's on the album, the Bowie song Heroes, we actually did go into the studio. So you see him singing on his Telefunken mic, and it definitely sounds better.
Really,
the thing I did
a Telefunken sounds better than the iPhone.
But it still sounds like Sammy at the end of the day, which is crazy.
Yeah.
There's some songs where he'll record it, in a kind of a dead spot. I think there was one he did in his walk-in closet, and that one sounded great. But there's other ones where he did in his shower, and he has this huge shower, and it's just all echoey. It's just like, dude, this is way too much reverb. So I had to do some isotope stuff and remove that. And then the last one I did, he was in a stairwell, and that was like super reverby. So
Atom Audio can provide all your monitor needs, whether you are setting up a first-time home studio for recording music or podcasts, or a world-class studio for professional mixing and mastering. Their unique accelerated ribbon tweeter design is famous for creating smooth, detailed imaging that let your speakers disappear into your music, allowing you to focus on the mix. Visit the Atom Audio YouTube channel for lots of cool free interviews, tutorials, masterclasses, and learn how to set up your studio monitor and control room. Just click the link in the show notes of this episode. The JZ Microphone Vintage Series are built by hand in Latvia and feature the patented Golden Drop capsule design for enhanced clarity that will give your recordings that classic vintage tone. Our friends at JZ Microphones have come up with a special offer only available to you, Recording Studio Rockstars listeners. Use the limited time coupon ROCKSTARS to get 50% off the V67, V47, or the new V12 microphone at JZ Mike.com. Go ahead. I mean, if you want to comment on Isotope, they've been a sponsor on the podcast. Welcome sponsor. But I love talking about any of their stuff. Is there anything that you said you used that to take some of the reverb off from the shower? How would you go about doing that?
Well, it's the D-Reverb plugin. So, there's a learn button on it, which works really well. And then there's a reverb tail slider on there as well, which you can keep a little bit of it, or remove it. And it helped big time because it was kind of hard to understand what he was saying, intelligibility of the lyrics, because it's just drowned in reverb. So I don't know what the guys at Isotope do. They do some like voodoo magic stuff. That's it's beyond me.
Right.
Like just yesterday, I had mistakenly had a pair of headphones on in the live room, and these guys are playing acoustic guitars, and then there's a break where they just hold this, a whole note for a chord, and I hear it clicking in the background. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I forgot to do that. It's our best performance. So Isotope to the rescue.
The old extra pair of headphones in the live room trick.
So that's a lesson you should learn early on. And I still screw up to this day. And it's just like, oh. But hey, now we got Isotope, so you can fix that.
What's amazing? Let's invent something right now. How come headphones aren't made where when you take them off your head, the spring mute switch mutes the headphones?
It's funny you mentioned that, because I actually have some headphones that do that. There was a pair of AKG headphones that do that. And if you know AKGs, they have that little band at the top, and then there's some strings. So it automatically mutes, and then when you put it on your head, the thing on top stretches these strings, and it turns the mute off.
Smart.
So they actually do make those phones. The problem is sometimes they would fail, and the clients would put the headphones on. It's like, I don't hear anything. It's like, just push them on your ears a little bit harder and it'll work. So sometimes they would cut out. So there was a flaw in there, but the idea was there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I wish they would, just somebody would make those work.
Somebody will.
Yeah.
You know, like in the same way that you have those AirPods from Apple and you take them out of your ear.
Right.
And
they turn off and disconnect.
Yeah. Somebody will come up with that.
Yeah. So yeah, with iZotope, it's awesome that you just remove that, extraneous noises and all that. And I believe I've used it on some of the recordings for the band just to clean up noise and stuff.
Yeah.
But the D reverb one works great.
Yeah. And then Rockstars, just to clarify, in case we glossed over that, because we tend to do that, what we're talking about, what Jaimeson's talking about is there's a click track going in the headphones. Everybody's got headphones out on the floor. Somebody takes their headphones off and leaves and goes into the control room, but those headphones are still on, even though they're laying on the floor. And then in the break or, some quiet spot, you can hear the click track bleeding through the room and then getting into the mic.
Yep. Yeah. It's an unfortunate thing, but man, that iZotope stuff.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what field you're in, whether it's post-production or recording rock and roll bands. It saves me every time. Yeah. And I heard your podcast with Larry Crane and how much he uses it. Just like, it's like, I didn't think about that.
Yeah, I thought that was cool when he brought that up too.
Yeah.
I messed with that, but I haven't, it's not a regular part of my workflow yet, but I want to explore it. And, honestly, that's one of the things we can talk about is these days with recording and making records, we're faced with such an incredible number of tools and options that at some point we just have to accept that there are these things that we have that we want to use that we might have to just be patient till we get around to actually using it more in the studio, right?
Yeah, it's deep. I'm still learning things about that plugin. I saw another podcast where Michael Brower had to take this 2-track mix.
Yeah.
They have some plugins that will like take drums out of a 2-track mix or take vocals out of it. It's like, I don't even know how that works.
Yeah. Rebalance.
Black magic stuff. Like I was actually doing this thing for Jason Bonham where he had this old recording of him playing with Robert Plant. And he wanted me to make it sound better. It's just like, it was a horrible recorded thing. It was like a set tape in the audience or something. But I ended up using that rebalance thing and kind of taking it apart, and it actually worked. And I was blown away.
Amazing.
How that works. I didn't know about that until I listened to this podcast with Michael Brower, and it was just like, I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, me too.
Like iZotope. It's like, wow.
And I haven't super dug into doing that yet, but now I'm like, I'm going to go back and take my old records where I just screwed up the mix. I did a record for a old blues artist named Roscoe Gordon, who was one of the first guys to record for Sam Phillips in Memphis before Sam started Sun Records. And when I recorded Roscoe, I only had a DAT machine. And as a young kid, I had this chance to go in and record him in his apartment. I just put a vocal mic on him and I blended his piano or his guitar together. And it wasn't until later that I was like, I really buried the vocals.
Oh, no.
Thinking I was stuck forever. But now I could just go back and raise the vocals a little more in the mix.
Yeah, it's incredible how it works. It's not perfect, but I think if I had a better sounding recording, it would work, but, cassette tape, it might have been recorded in front of a house or something, because it's you could tell that you could hear all the instruments. Like whoever was doing live sound for that was doing a really good job.
So what were some of the other exciting discoveries for you or challenges with doing the Lockdown 2020 record for Sammy Hagar?
Yeah, it's mostly like whoever's recording, like what room are they in? But it almost like just becomes a character of it, because there's only so much you can tweak. And when people see these videos on Instagram or on YouTube, it's this kind of a lo-fi project, so you're not going to it expecting it sound like a slick record. It's more of, you it is what it is, and I just try to make it the best I can. And I'm actually surprised at myself, like how much you can improve it. The band is absolutely loving it.
Well, it's almost like and I can hear there's a sound to that record,
Yeah,
right? But
definitely very
it's
lo-fi.
Well, I didn't think of it as lo-fi. It's more like it just has a character, an identity to it. And then, the beauty about art is the way that we balance everything within those limitations, right?
Yeah, it's just a different medium. It's the iPhone medium.
Right. Well, we live it. We live with it every day.
Yeah, right.
What's it like to work with those guys? I mean, you clearly are doing a lot of records with people who really understand classic rock, or even classic is almost going too far back. Because of course I was in high school in the 80s when they were calling stations classic rock stations, and
right.
I feel like Sammy. Well, I don't know. I'm no expert on Sammy's whole career arc, but obviously I learned about him in the 80s and stepping in with joining Van Halen and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I Can't Drive 55, right?
Yep. That's still his big hit.
Yeah. I still can't drive 55.
Right. So yeah, it's an amazing band to work with, and it's almost like a dream come true. And again, our friend John Coonaberty was instrumental in getting me in the door on that. I guess I could just tell the whole story about that, since that'll make kind of for a nice story, and how I actually got into that. It's really about being at the right place at the right time and being ready. And what, I had met John originally at Coast. He was actually on his way out at that point. I think he was going into mastering. So he had gone on to this other studio called The Plant and was mastering there. But as I was coming up and starting to kind of make my own records, Justin had recommended that I go and use John for mastering. And I was like, okay. So I kept doing these records, and I would just send them to him for mastering, because he's a phenomenal engineer. Even mastering, he's great. The records would come out sounding so good that I just kept using him. So he kept seeing all my work and kept seeing me getting better and better and better. And then at the time when Chickenfoot was coming together, which was another one of Sammy's super groups, which was Sammy, Joe Satriani, Michael Anthony on bass, and then Chad Smith on drums from the Chili Peppers.
Wow.
Yeah, you would never think that all those guys would come together to make a band, but they made a really good record, and their first record went gold, which is awesome. I'm proud that I got to work on that record. But how it turned out was that John is connected to Joe Satriani because he's done all his records. And so when it came time to do this project, Joe wanted John to be there to make sure everything, was going to be sounding good. The producer engineer on the project was Andy Johns. And
cool.
You don't know who he is. He's, the brother of Glenn Johns. But they both equally worked on all those great records from the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin. And I think Andy did the Van Halen record.
Yeah. Andy did Zeppelin 4, I think.
Yeah, right.
Because I think I was just talking about it, and I mistakenly said Glenn until I Googled it. And I was like, I mean Andy.
Right. I know, you get those guys mixed up. So they went in to make this record. They didn't know if it was going to do anything or not. They were like, okay, well, we'll call in Andy Johns, and we'll get John to get in there to make sure that Sammy's studio is outfitted with, the right gear, and they need help and all that. But John thought that, they needed an assistant. He knew he wasn't going to be there the whole time. I mean, he's John Coonaberty. Why would he be an assistant for this whole project? Even though, we get to work with Andy Johns, but he was there for a few days, to get the band up and running. And then they just left me, Andy Johns is an old guy. So I ran the Pro Tools rig for him. And he just kind of told me, what to do and where to punch in, and, what he wanted to do. It was basically just a tape op at that point.
Amazing.
But then I think Andy Johns was living in LA at that time, and they had finished the record. And then Sammy decided that he wanted to do some punch-ins on the vocals. He wasn't going to call Andy Johns back. And he thought, well, if I was already there and no Pro Tools, is like, well, you can just do this. So he would schedule me to come in, and I would just do these overdubs for him. And then so one thing just after another, he just kept calling me in for this and that. And then it eventually worked out to where I recorded an acoustic record for him, and then it moved on to this live recording where he went out on the road with the band, which is now the Circle. This is kind of after life of Chickenfoot. They had toured for many years, and then I actually did the second Chickenfoot record with them. Unfortunately, Andy Johns had passed away shortly after I think they finished the first Chickenfoot record, and then the second one they brought in this guy Mike Frazier. And if you don't know what he's done, like AC/DC, Metallica, a lot of the big heavy bands. So they brought him in. So I think he'd worked with Joe. And so I got to assist him. We did that record. And then John came back to do another solo record with Sammy. And then I assisted John on that one. And then after that, he did the acoustic record that I recorded with him, and he just had me come. He didn't have John come in. So I recorded the acoustic record. And then when it finally came time for this live record after Chickenfoot and his other projects, he had basically it was the band The Circle. So it was the same lineup of Sammy and Michael Anthony and Vic Johnson, his longtime guitar player, and Jason Bonham on drums. So they had been playing all these shows and they recorded all of them. And then Sammy thought that they had some really good sets there and he wanted to hear what they had done. So he's like, hey, here's these recordings, clean these up and, let me hear them so I can see what we got. Well, when I got those, I took it very seriously. It's like, I'm not making a rough mix. It's like, I'm going to make a final mix. It's like, I want this gig.
Yeah.
I want a mix for Sammy Hagar.
Yeah.
So I spent a bunch of time and really cleaned those up because they weren't in very good in condition. Nothing was labeled either, which was crazy. It's just like track 1, track 2, track 3. And there's like 50 some odd tracks on this thing. And so I had to, go through and figure out what's what, is this a tom drum? Is this a snare drum? Then there's just random mics on stage. Like, I don't even know what that is. So I, figured it out, made it sound really good, brought it into him, and he was blown away. And he's like, oh my God, this sounds amazing. He's like, we're going to make a record out of this. Then I ended up getting that gig and we went through the whole tour and we picked out the best versions of the songs and we made a live record out of that, which was the first Circle record called At Your Service.
Right on. The STX 100D from the Spectra 1964 Custom Shop is the big brother to the now famous STX 100, a fully discrete mic pre with dual transformer isolated Spectra 101 amplifiers. The STX 100D is exactly the same original circuit found in Stax, Ardent, Advision, A&M, and Record Plant recording consoles. The sonic performance is identical. Best of all, it will plug into a single space of your standard 500 lunchbox. And if you want to add the sound of the famous Spectra C610 complementer, then check out the new STX 600 modules, combining the STX 100 mic pre and C610 into a single 500 module. Now you can get the same incredible sound in your studio that worked for famous producers like Tom Dowd with the STX mic pre's BBDI and complementers. Go to Spectra1964.com or call 801-797-0642. I love using iZotope plugins for my music and podcast productions. In fact, you're hearing Ozone and RX on my voice in this podcast episode. And now you can get access to all the iZotope plugins through the new subscription bundle. For only $19.99 per month, Music Production Suite Pro is designed for the serious recording, mixing, and mastering engineer, putting the finishing touches on music, film, and podcasts with fully pro versions of Ozone, RX, Neutron, Nectar, Neoverb, Tonal Balance Control, Visual Mixer, and more, including free plugin updates. And just for you rock stars, get an extended 30-day free trial subscription at iZotope.com/rockstars and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. Coupon not valid for subscription. Hey, Rockstars, we're back now for the jam session. My guest today is Jaimeson Durr, joining us from Wally's HydeOut studio in San Francisco. talking about Sammy Hagar and lots of other things. You ready to jam, Jaimeson?
Let's jam.
Let's jam. All right. I feel like I cut you off mid-story. So you guys just started making the first Circle record together, right?
Yeah. And then it came time to do the full-length record. And so Sammy went in and started demoing all these songs. And I just, we're usually him and acoustic guitar, sometimes an electric and a vocal. And then he would, send those out to the band. And then once they kind of figured out what they were going to do song-wise and arrangements, then they had Jason Bonham come out. So I got to record him kind of for the first time, which was an honor. And it was great that I had worked with Andy Johns, who worked with Jason's dad, John Bonham. And I got to really watch, like when I was working with Andy, it's like I watched everything he did. I took notes. I took pictures. It's like I wanted to see how he got the sound. So I learned a lot working with him. And it was in the same room, which was a bonus.
Give us some details. Give us some juicy details.
So the room is Sammy's rehearsal / recording space. So he has this warehouse, and it's the front half of it is the studio, and then there's some offices. His office there, and like a dinner table there, for taking breaks and stuff. And then the middle portion of the warehouse is all gear storage. So it's all the gear from touring and stuff. So there's tons of road cases out there and stuff. And then the back third of the warehouse is all of Sammy's exotic cars.
Nice.
So all of his Ferraris, even the one in the video, I Can't Drive 55.
Oh,
that
man.
Ferrari's back there. And it's just so cool to walk back there and look at it going, whoa, that's a famous car. And his most famous song. It's cool. It's a piece of history. So, it's a trip. So anyways, the studio is a pretty good sized live room with really high ceilings. I don't know, there must be like 30 feet high. So it's a pretty good sized live room, very lively. So, you can get that kind of Jason Bonham or John Bonham drum sound.
Yeah. And
then think at one point it actually even put like a mic out in the warehouse. So I got that long throw of the, that kind of that sound. And that's, you have John Bonham's son, Jason Bonham. He plays really similar. It's amazing when he plays Led Zeppelin songs. It's just like, whoa.
Wow.
It's like close your eyes and you think it was John Bonham. So that was a really treat getting to record him and use all the same techniques that I learned from Andy Johns recording his dad on Led Zeppelin 4. So that was a super treat.
What were some of the ways that you mic'd up the drum kit? Because we like geeking out on that stuff. I mean, you said you put a room mic out in the warehouse.
Yeah, I kind of added that. I don't know if Andy Johns had done that. He may or may not have, but I thought that was, a cool thing to do for sure.
Yeah.
Even if you use it or not, it's just extra tracks. It's like you have almost unlimited tracks in Pro Tools, so why not? And then, so there was that, it's all about the room mics really for that sound in the right room. And the trick I learned was putting a pair of, I think Andy Johns had used U87s in figure 8 mode in kind of a spaced pair out in front of the kit.
Oh, cool.
And then he would experiment with like having them higher or lower. If you have them higher, they're going to get more splash from the cymbals. More of the room, you put them lower, they get more of the shells of the kit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we might have used 2 pairs of those. I think there were some lower ones and some upper ones. And we might have blended the 2 of those. But
in the same plane?
Yeah, on the same plane, yeah. So they were like just lower and higher on the same plane. And then, they're probably about 6 to 8 feet apart from each other.
How far away from the drums?
I would say probably about 10 to 15 feet.
Oh, okay. So they're pretty far out there. So this only works if you got drums in a big space.
Big room, yeah. And that's how you can mic it. The other interesting thing he did is I didn't do this, but I'll share it with the rock stars, is that he took a 421, the same mic I'm speaking into right now, and took off the little clip thing, taped that to a Shure mic box, and then stuck it inside the kick drum because he liked a sealed drum head. So we had to take the drum head off, cut the cable, run it through the little air hole in the kick drum,
Mm-hmm.
and then resolder it back. And then put the drum head back on.
I think we did that on a record too. You know what's funny is Brad Jones, who was my mentor, he had come back from, he might have even been in San Francisco. And he came back with that idea where, like, you know, you can get a mic inside a kick that has both heads on it, right?
Yeah, I thought that was clever. I mean, it's a lot of work.
It was a lot of work. It still sounds like a basketball.
Yeah, but somehow, you know, he made it sound gigantic. I don't know.
So, but what did he? So he put the clip, but you said the box was inside. I'm a little confused.
Yeah, he put it on a Shure box so that it would raise it up because he had to put the mic on something. So he just duct taped it to a Shure mic box.
Okay.
You know, just the normal size, or you can use it.
And it was a 414.
421.
421. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Usually use those on toms, but you know, he'd stuck it in the kick
sort of
drum.
Pointed towards the beater on the inside of the drum.
Yeah, so it was low. It was only high as a mic box would be, which is only a few inches. And then, but yeah, that was an interesting technique.
Yeah, very cool.
What other things did I learn? There, you know, the typical things for the other mics. You know, standard overheads, which I think were 414s and 421s on the toms and 57 on snare top and bottom.
But he wasn't doing like the Glenn, you know, what they call the Glenn Johns technique.
Right. No, we weren't for this. We just had the room mics. And, you know, it's interesting. Being in the same room with Chad Smith, the guy, he's a big dude. He's really tall. I'm sure you'll see it in pictures of him with the Chili Peppers or even with Chickenfoot. He is like 6'6" or something.
Wow.
So and he's a strong dude. And so when he hits that snare drum, it's in the live room. It's just like every nerve in your body just twitches. You're just like, oh, there's so much sound pressure level coming out of the snare drum. It's insane.
Amazing. That works. That's pretty good for big stages, you know?
Yeah.
If you want your band to rock, you need a drummer that's got a little power behind him.
Yeah. And you know, it's just the way he hits it was just, it's awesome.
That's cool, man. What were some things that you remember learning from any of these guys about, you know, just smart ways to record guitars, record bass?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I really watched what John did for, that would be John Coonaberty, did for miking up the guitars. And it's a pretty simple thing, just using, again, a Sennheiser 421 and an SM57. And the thing that I'd always done in the past, this may be like a no-brainer for most people, but if you have multiple speakers in a cabinet, to get the phase right, like don't put two mics on one speaker, put a mic on each speaker. And then you don't have phase problems. It's like, I don't know how that works because it should work, but you know, each speaker is its own independent thing.
Right. They're not, even though they're getting the same signal, it doesn't mean that they're exactly in unison together. Maybe
right.
That's it.
So we would just put, you know, a 58 or a 57 on one speaker and then a 421 on the other. And then it's just kind of off the cone and just pointed straight in.
Very cool.
So it's, and I've been doing that ever since. And then, you know, there was, when I worked on the Joe Satriani record, I was the assistant that went out and put the mics on the cabinet. And then Mike would tell me to, you know, move it here or there. And most of the time I just put it in the right spot and he's like, oh, sounds good. Let's record. So,
nice. So you guys would do a 57 and a 421.
Yeah. And then you just blend those two together to taste and then that's it.
All right.
And, you know, it really starts with, you know, is it a good amp, good cabinet? You know, we're using Marshall cabinets and the player, you know, you get all those.
Yeah.
It's a piece of cake.
Yeah. Rockstars, just for clarity, that's the Sennheiser 421 and the Shure SM57, which you all know very well. That one.
Yeah.
For sure.
Very, very, very standard mics. But yeah, that was a takeaway. It's like, oh, you put them on different speakers. It's like, oh, okay. Then you don't have to worry about the phase.
Mics you could literally build your studio with. You could literally hammer the nails with those and then record with them later.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, at least the 57, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 421, you know, I think those have probably taken a few nosedives from that clip.
Yeah, I know that.
I don't know what is with that design, but you know, when you're adjusting the mic and you accidentally grab that clip and it falls off and hits the tom drum and falls on the floor, just like, oh, it's
a little frustrating.
Just super gloom.
Did you ever experiment with the whole taking the transformer out of the 57 or any of that kind of stuff? And did you get into soldering and building cables, taking things apart, all that?
That's one skill that I really wish I had. And I try to do it, and I'm just terrible at it. There's guys that are much better at that. As much as I try to do it, it's all about having the right equipment too. You have to have a good iron and have to have one of those solder suckers. I've done a little bit of it. If you have better gear, it's easier. But
it goes back to the start, man. You guys had you had a maintenance budget for the studio. Why fix it?
Yeah, right. Some things, we have to solder, and there's other partners of mine that are a lot better, so I just let them do it.
Yeah, cool.
But yeah, I wish that is a skill that I hopefully have soon.
Now, what about recording bass? I mean, if you're going to record Michael Anthony, you better know how to record bass.
Right.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Okay. So yeah, I have a good one for that I learned from Andy Johns, and I just remembered that because you asked me about it. I was like, what is so unique about recording bass? I usually just put a DI on it and call it a day. But for Michael Anthony, this was Andy's thing, is that he would get a DI off the bass, but then he would put, I don't remember what mic it was. I think it might have been another 414, and he would put that about 2 feet out in front of the bass cabinet. I was just like, what are you doing? Like, that is so far away. And he'd say, oh, it eliminates the phase problems between the DI and the mic. I was like, what? So I was like, okay, if it worked for John Paul Jones, like, I guess it'll work for Michael Anthony on this project. Okay. So that was Andy Jones' technique on that.
Really? I mean, it's so funny
I've never
because
seen that.
Not knowing any better, you'd think, well, that would create phase problems, but maybe the 2 foot distance like cancels certain frequencies that you wish you weren't featuring anyway, or something.
Yeah,
helps highlight others.
Somehow that worked. And then working with Mike Frazier.
Yeah.
He had a bit of a different technique, and he would combine several mics. I think he would actually use a 57 and a 421 on the bass cabinet on Michael Anthony's 8x10 cabinet. I think he would do that. There might have been 1/3 mic and then a DI, and then he would blend all those together.
Nice.
So sometimes I'll use that. Most of the time for me, it's usually just a DI, and then I can reamp it later or use some, amp plugins, some UA, Ampeg, emulations always seem to work well.
Yeah, I imagine that, the challenge or the cool thing about doing the multiple mics is you can kind of sculpt the sound a little bit. The challenge is you need to be able to trust what you're hearing in the control room so that you can make a good call. And then, I mean, I don't necessarily dig this deep into it looking for problems when I'm setting up. However, a problem that you could find yourself running into would be if certain notes seem to disappear in the sound and other bass notes really stand out. And those are frustrating moments because a lot of times you're like, you want to be able to make the call, but you kind of have to accept it. You're like, I don't know, it could be anything. It could be like the bass itself, And
it's one of those things where you can like flip the phase, and then it's better on one frequency, but worse on another. And it's just like, well, can you split the difference? There are plugins that do that, like the UAIPB, I think it's what it's called, where you can vary the phase. I haven't played much with that. I usually will either slide it around in Pro Tools or, or just mix it down, or just use the DI and get as much out of that as I can.
Yeah, the IBP is a universal audio plugin modeled after the Jonathan Little of Little Labs, his IPP variable phase box, which was that was fun to have in the studio too, because you take that, you just start turning the knob, and you're like, where's the sweet spot? But then, like other things too, you're like, does this sound better, or does that sound better, or does this sound better? And what do you guys think about that sound?
And that's I think that's the killer in the studio was, is this better or is that better? It's just like, you have to make those decisions pretty quick and just move on.
Yeah.
Because your talent or your client is, their patience is going to wear thin. And that's something that I kind of learned early on in the studio and watching other engineers, that they would spend so much meticulous time just trying to get the mic in just the right spot and just to get the right sound. And it was just like, it's good enough. Like the singer or whatever is getting a little antsy, you kind of see this, they only have so much patience before, you start messing with that delicate, balance where, their ego's good until where you like break it down and they're not singing as well. So, you have to be definitely careful of that and not worrying about the minutia, really.
Yeah. Well, another place you have to be conscious of not wearing people out is getting everybody comfortable with their mixes and their ability to perform. So talk a little bit about that. I mean, if Chad Smith is banging on big drums in a space, what have you learned about the right way to set up the band? Now, would you have the band playing together and then maybe still sometimes be replacing certain sounds? Or is it, my gut tells me the records in your playlist are not ones that are just built one brick at a time,
Yeah, I'm a big fan of recording a whole band at once. There's some magic that happens when you get that interaction with the whole band.
And when you got players like that, they know how to do it.
Yeah, and there's happy accidents that can happen, which I totally love. I mean, I really get off on that on when a band comes into my studio and plays live. It's just that's what makes tracking fun. Which doesn't make it fun is when you have to track one instrument at a time and build it, and then it works, and sometimes you have to do that, but it's good to see the whole picture at once instead of like, oh, we're going to put a little bit of paint here and a little bit of paint there, and then it's like, just be patient. Like it's gonna be the Mona Lisa soon. It's like, really? I don't see it yet. But for recording the band, like headphone mixes are super key, and I really, really pride myself on making really good headphone mixes for the band. It's, they have to feel confident that they're hearing that it should almost sound like the record in their headphones. Yeah. It makes it really inspiring for the band. And, the headphone mixers that I usually use are, you can make your own mix on it. They have, 4, 8, or 16 channels where you can build your mix. Sometimes, 16 is too many. So sometimes I'll pare it down. I've got a good tip on that after I tell you about their headphone setup. But for Chad in particular, I remember he liked to have as much control over his drums as possible. So if he wanted more snare drum, he could crank it up, or more kick, he could do that, or more overheads. So I would just feed him that, and maybe some toms. And we had 16-channel mixers at Sammy, so I would give him everything that he wanted. And then
just analog mixers, or getting into
they were
digital.
Furman. Mm-hmm. I don't remember the model number of it, but it's a 16-channel mixer.
More Ethernet cables. No, but they're actually analog over Ethernet, I think.
Well, these are not the 4-channel ones that most people see of the Furmans. It was a bigger one. It's like a blue box, and it's got 16 channels on it, and you can actually pan each one of the channels. It's really cool.
Cool.
Most mixers don't do this now unless they're digital, like the Avium system. Mm-hmm. So I gave him as much control, as he could. But a lot of times what I'll do is I'll go and listen to each guy's station and like balance it for them already. And if they need to tweak it, they can tweak it from there. Like give them a good starting point.
Yeah.
To go from. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll know that if in Pro Tools I've got the mix sounding good, and then you can just copy your faders up to the sends. And then I know that if my mix is sounding good in the control room and I put everybody else's mixer in the live room, their headphone mixers at 12 o'clock, that's a good starting point.
Yeah.
So I'm not having to go and build it. So if, Chad wants more drums, he can, turn those up. If Michael Anthony wants more bass, he can, just turn that knob up, but at least I give him a good starting point. And then, so then for overdubs, I'll give you this tip for the rock stars is, kind of leaving all those options open for a musician when they're not tracking basics. Let's say they're doing the lead vocal. I will then fold down all of the band basically, and then route that to like a stereo channel on the headphone mixer, and then make another one the vocal. So they have independent control of just their vocal and the band. Like I'll mix the band for them so they don't have to, want this or that. And if they want something different, they can just tell me. But for the most part, like 99% of the time, it sounds great to them because it's like the mix coming off the board or just right out of Pro Tools.
For when you're in vocals, when you're in vocal land, yeah.
When you're vocal land, or maybe you're doing, a guitar overdub, any overdubs really. And that's what I like to do to create a good headphone mix, because it's really important that it's inspiring and sounds good. And then, I just kind of mix as I go when I'm recording a band. I'm committing a lot of stuff on the fly, but I'm also using some plugins as well. So I'm kind of using a hybrid sort of a system as we're kind of building it. Because when they walk away with that rough mix, I want it to be pretty close to the final mix, because they're going to take that rough mix and they're going to listen to it about 100 times before you can get to that final mix.
So that can be a challenge sometimes, because, if you're trying to keep your session on a good schedule, it can feel like the rough mix comes at the very last second when it's just about time to leave.
Right.
What are some things that you do to make sure you still get that focus time on the rough mix and send it to people so that it sounds great?
It's just building it as you go, as you're getting sounds. Don't ever say, fix it in the mix. It's like, just fix it now.
Right.
Don't wait. It's just like, let it be inspiring to everybody and get everybody excited in the room that like, oh man, this is sounding great. Like, I love this record. I'm proud of this record. And then, the energy level goes up and everybody's excited about the project. I did a session yesterday with these guys that have been in the studio a few times, and they were just really head over heels about how good everything was sounding. And every time we added another instrument, it's just like, oh man, and it's like setting the vibe too, because I'm putting some reverbs in there too, mm-hmm. to get the whole vibe going so that they hear that and it's kind of starting to sound like a record.
How important is it to have anything on the 2 mix during all that process?
Okay,
too?
Good thing you mentioned that. And then I do throw a little bit of compression in there as well. And that's kind of what I'm hearing. It's not necessarily going to their headphones because they have stems, kind of split to them. And then that's like the final thing that I'm listening to in the control room. So I'm kind of mixing into that mix bus compressor.
And would that be a plug-in too, or would you always go out of the board for that?
It varies, but either way, it's an SSL style bus compressor that I use. Mm-hmm. I'm just a real big fan of that. So I'm either using our hardware SSL compressor, or I'm using the Plug-in Alliance one. I think it's Townsend something. Forget what it is. It's another SSL emulation that sounds really good. It's based on the same thing. And I just always use the same settings on that one. It's attack is 30, release is 0.1 or 0.3.
It's the Brainworks BX Townhouse bus compressor.
Yeah. And that one's, I believe it's 0 latency, really low processor intensive, so you can use it on a mix or during a tracking session.
Oh, that's
which
cool.
is great. And if you have HDX, then it runs on DSP, which is nice too. So I usually just have that in there just to kind of help glue everything together and sound exciting when the band comes in to listen. And then, I'm just kind of building it as I go. Just kind of getting the sounds pretty much all there and in place.
Cool.
So, and then I also don't have to necessarily do that much work during the mix. It's just, it's close to being there.
Look, every studio needs a good vintage mic for that classic warm sound. Whether you're looking for those airy highs, sweet mid-range, or silky low-end, a good vintage mic can put the magic in your mixes. So it's no wonder vintage mics have been loved and praised by thousands of engineers for decades. The JZ Microphone Vintage Series are built by hand in Latvia, using only the best electronic components, and feature the patented Golden Drop capsule design for great detail and richness of tone that will bring that classic vintage vibe to your studio and be a real workhorse for your sessions. This time, our friends at JZ Microphones have come up with a special offer only available to you, Rockstars. Use the limited time coupon ROCKSTARS to get 50% off the Vintage Series mics V67, V47, and the new V12 at jzmic.com. Adam Audio designs monitors with a mission to bring accuracy, transparency, and high definition to your studio, guiding you each step of the way on your journey from starting out in a home studio to installing your ultimate mixing setup in your pro studio. Check out their complete line of speakers and headphones, from the T-Series to the AX Series to their top-of-the-line S-Series, which all use the unique ART-accelerated ribbon tweeter design, famous for creating smooth, detailed imaging that let your speakers disappear deeper into your music. Want to feel awesome to make brilliantly accurate creative decisions in your mixes because you can finally hear your music clearly? Your ears are the greatest instrument you have, and if you can hear the music, then you can mix the music. Visit the Atom Audio YouTube channel for lots of cool free interviews, tutorials, masterclasses, and learn how to set up your studio monitors and control room. Just click the link in the show notes of this episode. Another record you did with Don Felder, there's a song, Falling in Love. It's got really crisp acoustic guitars, I noticed. And I wondered if you wanted to talk a little bit about how you like to record acoustics. How do you get things to just sound like shiny and crisp and lovely?
That's a good question. I did not have the pleasure of actually recording those guitars for that record.
Was that more of a mix project?
No, actually, Bob Clearmountain mixed that record. So I was honored to record some guitars. I actually recorded electric guitars.
Oh, cool.
On that. And Sammy did some backup vocals on that. So Joe Satriani was on that Don Felder record. And I remember Joe and Don, I guess it was Don's dream to get to jam with Joe Satriani. So it was kind of fun. I set them both up in the control room, and they both had their pedal boards there in front of the console. And I just panned, their parts left and right so they could be in front of their speaker, and they would just go, and they were just trading off solos during this one song.
That's fun.
I think it was the song "Rock You." Was the song on the album.
Now, I'm not going to let you off the hook though, because I know you know how to record acoustic guitars. Give us some good. What are some of your favorite ways?
So I have a couple different techniques for that. If it's one guitar, here's a good tip that I found. If it's just one acoustic guitar in the mix, I usually like to record it in stereo. So I'll do probably a pair of 414s, and I'll put them out in front of in front of the guitar, kind of between the sound hole and the 12th fret. And they'll be back, probably 1.5 feet or so. And then they're kind of angled in, pointing towards the guitar. Mm-hmm. And that gets a nice kind of stereo spread on that.
So the sound hole is between the two mics?
Yeah, I would say it's kind of pointing at more towards the end of the fretboard between the sound hole and the 12th fret.
Right. And then the other mic is over to if I'm looking at the guitar player, the other mic's to the left a little bit, looking kind of between the bridge and the sound hole, or am I thinking about this wrong?
Yeah, they're both if, you could put a laser pointer on them, they would both be pointing towards that. So one's angled a little left, one's angled a little right.
I see. It's kind of like an XY
yeah, but they're kind of spaced apart. They're probably
ORTF kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, almost opposite of that.
Okay.
And then they're spaced apart, so they're probably about 1 foot apart. And then one's cocked left, one's cocked right, so that they're both pointing there. So that's a kind of a stereo thing. And then you could, if it needed to be mono, you could sum them together, and they should be phase coherent, or you could just use one mic or the other.
Okay, cool.
And then if there's multiple acoustic guitars, like a session I did yesterday, there was 2 guys playing acoustic guitar. I would just use a small diaphragm condenser on them, like a Neumann KM184 or an 84, something like that, and just point that at the 12th fret. And I find that always works and gets a balanced sound. Doesn't get too boomy. Doesn't get too get all the string noise and stuff. And you put that back, probably about 10 inches to maybe 1 foot,
mm-hmm.
maybe a little closer, depending on, how hard they're hitting. But I find that works really well.
Yeah. It's funny just thinking about it and being reminded that, there's so many damn ways to record things these days, not even these days. Forget I said that. They're just like, we could just put the brakes on things and just go, I'm going to spend, a week trying every different way to record an acoustic guitar or an instrument. Cause you got 2 mics, there could be 3 mic things. There can be combos with DIs. There can be the single mic. And when you just said, if you have to sum it to mono, that still works. It's that reminder. It's like, oh yeah, 2 mics on a guitar, but you have to consider that what happens if it goes mono? Is it going to kill that sound, or is it going to still work?
Yeah, exactly. Another really good tip that I've learned is that, at the end of the day, you just got to use your ears. It's like, I think we all know what an acoustic guitar sounds like in a room. So what I'll do is I'll put headphones on and just move the mic around until I find the sweet spot. I mean, that's a really good way to learn for any of the rock stars. It's like, just, move the mic around until you find the right spot, and then just tighten the mic stand down, and that's it until the guitar player don't move. Sometimes I'll tape their feet. I won't tape their feet down to the ground, but I'll put little boxes around their feet, because even if you just moved a little bit, it totally changes the sound. So you just have to tell them, I first say, get comfortable, just sit how you're going to sit when you play. Then I put the mic on it. Then once we get the good sound, in headphones, then I put little boxes on their feet. So if they have to get up, get a drink or whatever, go to the bathroom, they can come back, sit back in the same spot and put their feet in the same place.
Like Rockstar's picture, like in the police,
right?
detective movie where they've taped the dead body on the floor. You just do that for their feet.
Yeah, right.
Dead bodies and great guitar sounds.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, cool. Let's see. What else should we talk about? Should we talk about vocals? Are those important?
Those are very important. That's unless you're doing an instrumental record, then it's doesn't need to be there. But vocals are definitely a key element in most music.
Yeah, your voice sounds great on this mic right now, actually. Tell us what you're putting your voice through right now.
Okay, so this is just a Sennheiser 421 into my Apollo, going through a Manley Voxbox emulation, which I'm a big fan of this Voxbox because it's the same thing that I use on Sammy's vocal. He has a very simple vocal chain, so it's a Telefunken ELA or ELAM 250, which is a little bit different than 251. Is that the 251 does multi-pattern and the 250 just does cardioid and omni. And since it's mostly just on Sammy's vocals and we just need cardioid, so we got him that one. It's a little bit cheaper, but it's the same basic mic. It sounds great on his voice. So I run that into a Voxbox right into Pro Tools. That's it.
Right on. And in that case, you do a physical Voxbox.
Yeah, a physical hot box.
There you go.
It is a hot box. It's got a lot of tubes in it. So So yeah, I know how to use this thing, and it's easy. You almost can't screw it up. It's the thing with high-end gear. And
now the Voxbox. Thank you, Ivana.
Yeah,
Manley. The Voxbox is a mic pre that has some EQ in it. It also has compression, but it also has sort of like a de-essing feature or something.
It does have a de-esser in it, which has come in handy for some other vocalists too. And then it's got a like a Pultec style EQ as well. And it's interesting that on the low end, there's the three knobs, and usually you turn them up and it adds more. On the mid, it's actually a reduction knob. So it says -10. So you can choose to take out some frequencies. So for me, it's like I'm always pulling out 200 in vocals. It's like that's always just the boomy stuff that you just don't need.
Right.
So if you look on all my mixes, it's like the first plugin is the FabFilter EQ3. And I'm just pulling down 200 and then, high passing all the low end up to like 60 or something like that. And then on the and then it's got a high shelf thing on the EQ too, which works. It sounds great too. And it's very transparent, kind of like a Pultec.
Yeah, it's very nice sounding.
But on Sammy, I don't use any EQ, any de-essing. I just use a little bit of compression because he can scream. So I got to kind of tame that, or he'll clip it.
Let me ask you this. So that makes me think, rock and roll, which all this stuff we're talking about is, and I haven't asked you the question yet, tape or not tape. How's that important in recording rock and roll? When you've got things that you say he can scream, you think about wanting to print this to something that kind of really accepts that in a beautiful way,
Yeah. Well, it's been a while, honestly, since I've worked on tape. I started in my career early on working on tape, and then Pro Tools was just starting to come in. This is early 2000s, late 90s. So it was Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of experience on the tape, but
okay.
The sessions that I have done are great because it's like instant gratification. I was like, oh, this is why people record on tape. It sounds so good. And I actually like the workflow of it because I think a lot of people get caught up in the Pro Tools world or the DAW world, like, oh, you can fix that. You could just cut that and nudge that and whatever. I like it just, committing to tape. So there's sometimes I wish I could just record basics to tape. That way there's, it is what it is. It's like, yeah, you messed up, go out there, do it again, just do it again until you get it right.
Have you found other things in Pro Tools that give you what you feel like tape is described as doing? Are there tools that you use that sort of soften the tone, make rock and roll, make sure your rock doesn't sound harsh when you're recording?
There is. There's actually a couple of good plugins for that. The tape emulations are quite good, and I'll use that on every mix I do. There's a Slate plugin that I use, VTM, I believe it's called, Virtual Tape Machine. Yep. And I just put that on +9 or GP9 30 IPS, and it just has a sound of making things sounding big and kind of tame some transients as well. So that's on every mix. Sometimes I will, or on the mix bus rather, but sometimes I will put it on individual channels if they need some taming. But sometimes tape can like soften things too much.
Right.
For me. And sometimes I like that transient, which is, definitely not a problem for recording digital. You definitely get all of that. So knowing how to tame those with compression is ideal. So I use a lot of that if there's anything that's really transient. But usually on drums, I won't track with much compression. I used to. And this is another thing I learned from Andy Johns is like, he didn't track with compression. And I thought that was just mind blowing at the time. It's like, what? You have to record with compression on drums.
We got all these great compressors.
Yeah, right. But he didn't. And I was just like, oh, okay. Well, your drums sound awesome. It's like, I'm not going to compress drums anymore during tracking. So, and I just do it all on the mix side, and there's, parallel compression and individual compression and it, you can do whatever you want, keep your options open to a certain extent, unless it's something very transient that you want to tame. But usually if you have a good drummer that knows how to hit hard,
right, then there's already consistency and everything in the sound. Yeah, no, I learned that from Steve Albini. Same thing. I had been recording, we had a distressor. So we ran the snare mic through a distressor, and then he had to sort of, when he got the track and did some mixing for us, he had to re-expand it because it was too compressed.
Right.
And then when I watched him record, it was just like, just go straight to, straight in that way.
Yeah. I think that, with all the plugins, you can always just, if you want to hear that sound, put a plugin on it so it's not destructive.
Right.
So if you want to hear that sound, do that. And then if you want to do less, that's the kind of beauty of, I think now, of being able to record with plugins on, they have to be zero latency. Otherwise,
big time
problems.
Big time.
But most of the plugins I like to use are all zero latency, which I'm a big fan of, because you can record with them. And so you can kind of just get that sound.
Well, and you're using the Waves sound grid, which I think gives you that ability as well.
Yeah, it does. Well, yeah, you can commit it or not, or you can just put it on the insert in Pro Tools. So which is a nice thing to do.
Yeah.
And then what were we talking about? We're talking about
making hit records.
Oh yeah. These are all the things we have to do to make hit records.
Vocals. Like you were recording Sammy on the Elam 250 through the Manley Vox box.
Yeah. And then, and then there's takes, it's funny, like recording somebody like Sammy, you think like he's sang in front of millions of people over his lifetime. He's had so much success and sang in front of all these people. But there's times where he's in the studio, it's just him and I, and he feels vulnerable sometimes. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, whoa, like you're shy of singing in front of me? It's just like, okay. So yeah, I put him at ease. I've been working with him long enough that we have this comfortable relationship. But there's times where, singers will feel vulnerable, especially if they're singing a song that they are at home, they're writing it down and they kind of have an idea of, how they want to sing it. And then they come in and sing it and they're like, I don't know, does this suck or is this good? So it's, it's kind of an honor that he's looking to me for guidance on that.
Right. So what's the appropriate strategy in that moment? Is it to point your finger and laugh and make fun of them?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Is that how you bring out the best?
Ego. It's like, you suck. Give it up. No, I will, it's always positive reinforcement. And it's also good not to be a yes man. Somebody like that, oh, it sounds great, Sammy. Oh, you're great. You're the best. He wants an honest opinion, and so, I'll listen through it. It's like, well, this line could be better here. Let's punch in that one, or this line and or he'll listen to it, but, he'll usually do a handful of takes. We'll do it a couple punch-ins and then, he'll go take a break and then I'll comp it. And this is for really any singer. That's just my process. And then, I'll do a comp of the vocal, taking all I think the rock stars probably know what a comp is, I'm guessing.
Yeah, where you're editing between multiple takes to create one master take.
Yeah, we'll make a best of, a take from, or part from take 1, part from take 5.
I guess comp stands for compilation or something like that.
Yeah.
Composite.
Exactly. Yeah, I think composite. So then, I make the comp and then he'll come in and listen, or any singer will come in and listen. And then, what do you think? And then, if there's some weak spots, we'll have them punch in wherever, it could be better, or maybe we'll do some harmonies or some doubles or something, I'm always a big fan of like doing something different for the choruses, let's double it, or let's add a harmony here, something like that. So,
yeah, it's interesting having worked with a lot of different vocalists. I've learned that, I'll try to get a sense of how they like to do vocals. And then sometimes the only sense you get is stop asking so many dumb questions and let's record something.
Right.
But like, one vocalist would prefer to just sing takes and then comp it. And then I do the comping and take care of that. Another vocalist wants a sense of control and to know where they are with things. So they want to hear it back and then say, oh, let me redo that line. And then as an engineer, you're like, should I punch over that one, or should I make a duplicate playlist and punch over the duplicate,
Exactly. And that's what I'll do. It's just like, I don't want to throw away anything. There was a good quote that Sammy had told me when working with Mickey Hart, and, they were working on tape and they were running out of tracks. And I think Sammy says like, well, let's just erase, some of these tracks. We don't need all these tracks. And Mickey Hart's like, whoa. This is a recording studio, not an erasing studio. And so I still stick with that, and anybody says delete that, it's like, whoa.
That's recording awesome, studio. Man. That's hilarious.
Not an erasing studio.
I love it.
So keep everything, duplicate the playlist. It's like, make another track, you don't want to have too many options at the end of the day and you want to commit. But if you're torn on a line, I'm usually pretty just, just get the comp made and just commit to that.
Yeah. I like,
be objective about it.
I like having those safeties there somewhere, but not necessarily having to see them. So it's like, I like listening to what we're listening to, but if we need something, maybe I could go dig for it,
Yeah, exactly. Because the singer may came back and it's like, I don't like the way I sang that line. Do we have anything else?
Yeah.
You dig back through it, even Sammy will do that, and I'll just have to go back and, you have to be super organized and know where all that stuff is.
The OWC Envoy Pro Electron is the fastest, toughest, mini-sized, universal, portable USB-C SSD that lets you record from anywhere in the galaxy with confidence. With speeds of up to more than a gigabyte per second real-world performance, the OWC Envoy Pro Electron gives you high-speed audio data for recording and playback. Take your sessions and sample libraries with you anywhere you go. Built for reliability, the OWC Envoy Pro Electron is waterproof, dustproof, and crushproof. Never worry about your storage and the safety of your music again. Find the new OWC Envoy Pro Electron and all your storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars. All right, so we got a couple of questions in here from the rock stars that I thought I'd throw at you.
Sure.
This one comes from Cole Smith. They're sort of general ones, but Cole asks, what techniques or gear do not produce satisfactory results? Or let's talk about some big failures as we all learn from mistakes.
Right. What was the gear question again?
It was like, what techniques or gear did not produce satisfactory results?
Oh, that's a good question.
I know. I've never heard anybody ask that one, right? What sucks, man? I know we're not here to do a bunch of name calling, but were there any techniques you remember trying in the studio where you're like, wow, that was terrible. I don't want to record that way at all.
Okay. I think I have one that I learned from a really good engineer. Name is Michael Stavro. Incredible engineer.
Nice.
He worked on some Police records back in the day. He's written a book called Mixing with Your Mind, I believe.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, he really has a different approach to recording. And I had the opportunity of recording with him, but he had this technique. And I don't know how he did it because I couldn't replicate it. So I was just like, okay, this just doesn't work for me. So he was doing this MS recording thing. So he had this way of recording a stereo acoustic guitar and vocals. And maybe there's, more experienced rock stars on here that know how to do it. But for some reason, I just couldn't figure it out. And he'd have we'll just say a 414 or something that can do figure eight. And the key is the figure eight mic has to be the same on the front as the back. Sometimes they have different pickup patterns, like they'll be bigger in the front and smaller in the back.
Right.
The figure eight, so they have to be exact. And I think that might be my problem, is just getting the right mics to do that. And then you point that at the fretboard on the guitar. This would be an acoustic guitar. And then so one capsule is pointing towards the headstock and the other one's pointing towards the bridge on the guitar. And then there's a Omni mic on top of that. And what he would do is he'd tape it on top. And then you have to get it like perfectly aligned. You have to put headphones on and listen to the guitar player. And then you can then put a vocal mic on them. And I think that might be in figure eight as well to null out the guitar. But somehow he did it where it was this beautifully sounding acoustic guitar and a vocal. And there was like really good separation between the two. Mm-hmm. But that technique for me just fails every time. It's right. Like, I can't do it. I can't figure this out. So, I think that's the challenge with most engineers is like, how do you record the vocals in the acoustic guitar and get enough separation?
Yeah, I agree.
And sometimes I can nail it, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
That's sort of been always my take, is like just go for it, and it probably has more to do with the volume of the singing and the volume of the guitar playing than what I do with the mics, even.
Yeah, there's that too.
But this reminds me of because I was like, Lidge, what's your failed technique? And I feel like one that got me really excited was the idea that you could sing in the control room instead of putting headphones on, and you flip one speaker out of phase from the other.
Yes.
And then I would try that and I could never get it to work.
Oh, yeah. So I've been successful at that, because this is an interesting topic, that there are some singers that just can't sing with headphones on because it's just like the pitch.
Yeah, like a lot
wrong.
of them.
Yeah. And it's a really good technique to try, that if the singer's just not getting it, like they can sing fine, they'll sit down at a piano or play the guitar and they sound great. And then as soon as you put headphones on them, it's like, they're all over the place. And you're like, well, what happened? So yeah, I have tried that trick. And it has worked where, you put them like right behind you, flip the speakers out of phase, which I think you can do in Pro Tools.
Wait, you put the speakers behind you?
No. The singer would be behind you. You're sitting at the console,
right,
and the speakers are in front of you, so they would just be right behind you.
I think I just tried it in control rooms that were too live, probably. Like if you've got too much bouncing around, it's not going to work. But if there's directionality from the speakers, maybe then it works, because whatever's going into the mic, that's all that's going into the mic.
Right. Yeah. But I have been successful a couple of times to do that, and actually got really good performances out of the singers. So it does work. Another technique that I've heard, and I may have tried it too, is that if you can get a floor wedge and use that, because that's on the ground, and if you have it, kind of at a low volume, you get very little bleed on that. And even if there is, it's not the end of the day. And I've mixed a lot of live recordings, so it actually does does work.
Yeah. I mean, I love the sound of people just singing naturally in a space. And
Right.
I even recently watched a video with a buddy of mine who was singing and playing guitar. And I had set them up. Nobody had headphones, and it was just a mid-side mic in the middle of the room. And I listened. I was like, damn, I'd forgotten that he could sing that well, because I'd probably just heard. I probably just had some memory of the struggle with headphones and finding pitch center and all that. And you give somebody an acoustic guitar and it's resonating against their body.
Yeah.
And people just will surprise the shit out of you at how well they can sing.
Yeah. It is. Most people are not spending their life playing music in headphones.
Right. Or singing to music in headphones. Of course, the next generation of kids, they're all growing up singing along to speakers in their room.
Oh, yeah. There's that too. And, the thing they do is that because all of pop music is like heavily tuned, auto-tuned, all the vocals. I don't know if you've noticed this, but a lot of the young singers start singing like they're tuned. And it sounds totally unnatural. It's like, how do you do that?
Really? Interesting.
Yeah. I don't know if I
haven't quite caught
work
that
with
yet.
some young singers, or maybe you have kids or something that are coming up and singing. You're just like, what?
Well, I do have a
How can they mimic that?
I have a daughter who loves musicals. So I think the stage singing leaves a little bit more room for that kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I welcome that. I like to
pitch, I think.
To hear the pitch swell up into pitch.
Yeah, I just called it interpretive pitch. I think the word is not tuned, not
right. Yeah,
not
and it's funny that I'll if there's like a really good singer, but you need to fix a couple notes here or there, and then you put it up on Melodyne, to check the tuning, and you think that everything's going to be spot on because they sound so good, and you look at it and go, actually, they're not.
Yeah.
But it still sounds good. So at the end of the day, you still have to use your ears and not necessarily put it right on the note, which is what I love about Melodyne is you can click the note and you can hear it. It's like you're tuning a guitar, but you're tuning the vocals.
Yeah, I know. The challenge with Melodyne, of course, is you've got the ability to adjust all the pitch everywhere all at once. And you also have the ability to only adjust one little thing at a time. And it's like neither one of those is the right answer. It's somewhere in the middle, right?
It is, right. And there's sometimes where I'll just grab a note, and it affects the ones around it too. I've noticed this with tuning is you can go down the rabbit hole is if you fix one note, then the one next to it then sounds sharp or flat, depending where you put it. And then you just keep going, And I find that's the same way with editing drums. Once you move one drum hit, it's like, oh wait, now this one's early. Wait, now this one's late. And then it's like,
then the overdubs, then you have to wait and do the overdubs to the edited drum track.
Yeah.
Or else the pocket gets lost, right?
Yeah. That's almost a little bit of what I'm doing on this pandemic recording thing too. It's, where I had to kind of cut and move things. You just got to do what you got to do to make it sound good.
Right.
And it's hard when you have a section of a song where it's a little off and you have to kind of, where they call it like massaging it.
Right.
Like, let's just work out this little knot here and get it to work. But,
nice.
I
enjoy doing that stuff. It can be a challenge. And I've got my techniques and my ways of going through and massaging and editing stuff around us, even if it's not on a grid or anything like that.
Yeah. Right.
But for me, the trick is, not to get into all the button clicks, but the trick is not to have to look at the screen, not to have to zoom in and out, but come up with ways to grab some notes, hear, phrases of notes and quickly judge whether, is this ahead of the beat? Is this behind the beat? Can we move a few of these around, and rough them in quickly and then come back afterwards and, go through and crossfade it all and clean it up.
Yeah. And then there's times where you can just get so hyper focused on something that you just can't hear it any other way. So you have to back up, hear it in context. Like maybe you just listen to it the next day and close your eyes and don't look at anything. Don't know where that part is, just listen.
Yeah. And there's a lot of the work that we do in the studio like that. I call it, it's like there's stuff we need a magnifying glass for, and then there's stuff we need
right.
An aerial photo for. And what I learned is you can't be both zoomed in and zoomed out at the same time mentally, right?
Right.
You have to or at least I do. I have to go in and, zoom in, do a bunch of stuff up close, and then stop and then zoom out and listen that way.
Yeah.
And stop beating because I would beat myself up for it. Or you get caught in a loop where you're like, you're zoomed in, then you try and go zoom out and check it and then zoom back in, and it's just too much, And I don't mean visually, rock stars. I mean like literally mentally, like,
yeah.
It is visual too, because you are going to zoom in and out, but it's like also just how you listen to the whole thing.
Yeah. I think it's like a painting, you like look really close at some like little detail thing. And then once you back up, you're like, oh, actually it's okay.
I know. I always look at that. I'm like, was Van Gogh, was he looking super close at the details, or was he standing way back and reaching out with his arm while he was painting?
Yeah, right. Everyone's got their own process, and it's all art at the end of the day, and then we're all just trying to make it as best that we can.
Yeah, but if you're making records, don't chop one of your ears off. That's not a good strategy.
Yeah, that would be detrimental to your career for sure.
All right, here's a question from Ronald Probst, if I'm pronouncing your name right, Ronald, hopefully. What is it about the music industry that you dislike the most?
Oh,
another tough question. Sorry, we saved all the tough ones for you.
That's okay. I like this one. I think sometimes I wish I was born earlier so that I could have lived in the heyday of the 80s when all the budgets were flowing and, we're working in big studios all the time and you could get rich being an engineer.
Yeah, when the label guys were buying their girlfriends Mercedes.
Yeah, and now it's just like I didn't get that opportunity, and so, but I think that is probably what I don't like about the music industry is that, I guess people just aren't paying for music anymore, which is kind of sad. You have your Spotify subscription and you pay, I don't know, $12-15 a month for it or whatever, and then you get to listen to anything and everything you want, and the artist gets paid like pennies on that. So it's and then they don't have as much money to pay you. So that I think is a downfall, but I think I'm still making, a living doing this, and I love doing it. So I'll probably do this for the rest of my life.
Yeah. I mean, I feel pretty lucky to be able to do what I do. And it's the same thing. It's like when I look at them, like if I could do anything I want, what would it be? And the answer is always like, just be in the studio all day making records with friends,
Yeah, right. And then we just kind of forget about the money. It's like, I don't care as long as we're, we're having fun doing our thing, making the artist you're working with, making their dreams come true. And that's what's, so rewarding about what we do. Besides, the music business and the money, it's like, and it's a different world because artists have to like self-promote now, and where they don't have record labels now, or maybe, we don't need record labels because it's total open market. It's up to you to promote yourself, but a lot of people just don't have that money to promote them like the labels do, but at least you have all the control.
Yeah. Howdy, rock stars. Do you feel like the time you've spent watching YouTube videos, trying out mix tricks, and tweaking version after version of your mixes has gotten you nowhere? Have you been looking for a simple, straightforward, step-by-step process for creating a pro mix that won't take years to learn? If you struggle with any of these questions, then the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass is just for you. Now you can discover the proven step-by-step mix system from Grammy-winning mixer Craig Alvin for consistently creating a pro-quality mix from your home studio that will sound amazing everywhere. Here are just some of the things that students are saying about the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass. This one comes from David P. Absolutely the most informative and helpful block of information and mentoring on the mix process I've ever been a part of. And Shane J. says, I've literally watched it 2 times at length, taken a plethora of notes, then combed back over some sections even more. You really knocked it out of the park on this one, and it was so incredibly eye-opening and useful immediately. Look, it's a lot of fun to mix. I'm like you, but it can be really frustrating to keep doing the same things over and over again, but not getting the results that you really want. So when you're ready to take your mixes to Grammy-winning quality, then go check out ultimatemixingmasterclass.com and get started now using the free preview button where you can immediately watch Craig's ultimate snare mixing trick. Happy mixing, rock stars. All right, well, let me jump into some of these closing questions. And you can give us quick answers on these if you want. Sure. When you started out in recording, what was holding you back?
Holding me back. Well, yeah, I did have a day gig before I really jumped into the recording thing. I think it's, you can do it little by little. You can work your day job and then work evenings and weekends on recording, and it will eventually come. I think I kind of had a problem making that leap of faith jump. And there came a time in my life where I think, life has a way of just kind of pushing you when you know it needs to happen, but you're afraid to take that jump.
Mm-hmm.
So I was working at this computer store in San Francisco when I was, selling computers for Pro Tools and building Pro Tools rigs and stuff for people. And then that place went out of business. And this is actually the same time or right around that time that I had opened up the studio at Hyde Street. And so I kind of had my foot in both ones. And then the store that I was working at went out of business. They decided to close their doors. And so I kind of just got pushed into it. And then that was it. It was just so I guess the money thing was holding me back. But once I got pushed, it was just okay, I guess I'm all in now.
Yeah.
And I just went in full force and just never looked back. I would say I haven't had a real quote unquote day job since then. So,
I don't think I've ever had a day job.
Yeah, right.
Last thing I did that wasn't music was delivering pizzas.
Yeah, I did that too.
And I wrecked my car doing a U-turn in an intersection, which apparently is not where you're supposed to do a U-turn.
Yeah, right. Well, that ended that career, right?
Yeah. But it was good because it forced me to just go, all right, dude, you need to get serious about this music thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So good question.
Some of the best advice you received.
Okay. I've got a good one. So around that same time that I kind of got pushed into the recording industry, I had lucked out and got this gig mixing a live, at the time the band was called The Dead. They used to be the Grateful Dead, but then Jerry died, and then they had this band called The Dead, which was all of them minus Jerry, and then they added Warren Haynes and Jimmy Herring to fill in on guitar. And so they went out on tour, recorded all these shows, and I got the gig mixing the live recordings, which was a pretty cool gig. But I was still pretty new, and I just got this big gig mixing these live shows. And for a mentor for me, I had Tom Fly, who was also mixing some Grateful Dead stuff. He was mixing some archive stuff. And we were actually working together because he had booked out this studio at the plant in Sausalito, which is unfortunately gone now. And then I was set up in a Pro Tools rig out in the live room. And being pretty green, he would come out and give me some advice and tell me, turn this up, turn that down, try EQing this way and that. And then he had, I wasn't sure about some things. And it's well, I don't know, is this good? Is that good? And then he just walked away and he told me, be bold in your work. And that just kind of stuck with me. It's oh, yeah, be bold. Don't second guess things. Just be bold. So that was some good advice I got from a good mentor.
Yeah, that's always a good tip. I remember getting that from a mentor of mine, Roger Mutino. He said, when you're mixing, don't turn something up a tiny bit. Turn it up 3 dB.
Right? Yeah.
It creates depth and everything.
Yeah.
And there was also a live sound engineer who came into my hay bale studio when Widespread Panic was in there.
Oh, nice.
And I watched him. He just grabbed the EQs and he was just rawr, just cranking these, these Mackie board EQs. And I was whoa, you can do that, and it sounded great.
Yeah. And I do that now, you kind of look at the plug and you're is that too far? It's just close your eyes and just turn it till it sounds good. Sometimes you just need to dime stuff and it sounds fucking good.
Yeah, I love it.
That's why it goes up that far.
Share a favorite hardware tool or something that you love to have with you that's physical on sessions.
Hardware tool.
Sure, SM57.
Right. I mean, that's always I'm thinking, a piece of outboard gear that I really love.
Could be a pencil.
It could be a pencil, yes, because taking notes is very important. A Sharpie.
A Sharpie, yeah.
Having a Sharpie.
Fine point or fat?
Usually fine point. I'm not sure if I'm going to put that down as my favorite piece of gear, but that's definitely a good one. Don't overlook the important things in the studio. One thing I hate is like looking around for something that you need like right now. I'm kind of a fan of this new piece of gear that is in my studio. It's the Retro 176.
Oh man,
That
get out.
compressor just sounds like you can't do anything wrong with it. It's just like everything sounds so good in it. And I'm a fan of compressors which you can't hear.
And it's the 176 is like the Tube 1176, the precursor, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like an LA2A, but it's got adjustable attack and release.
Yeah, we had those, and then we used them a bunch in Studio C at Sunset Sound, and that was the first place I ever heard them. And I was like, what? There's a Tube 1176? Hell yeah.
Yeah, so that has kind of been my new favorite.
What's a fun instrument to jam through that thing?
Well, vocals is all that I've used it on so far, but I got to imagine that bass would sound really good through it too.
Yeah.
Anything you want just really creamy sounding.
Try a room mic.
A room mic. Yes. Okay, that'll be the next thing I do. Is a room mic. Yeah, absolutely. It's fun having toys in the studio. At the same time, I try not to get too caught up in that. If something breaks, I don't get sorry about it. I mean, yeah, it sucks, but then you just move on. Okay, well, we'll get something else, or we'll use the plug-in version of it if it exists.
Speaking of which, share a favorite software tool or something you're excited about.
Favorite software tool that I can't live without.
Yeah, whatever.
In every mix.
Just something you dig, whatever. Anything.
I'm trying to think if there's a new thing that I'm digging. Okay, here's a good one. The Soothe plugin from, I don't remember what the company's called. I don't know if you know about this Soothe plugin. It's like a de-esser on steroids. It de-esses like everything.
That's Oak Sound or Oak Sound or something like that.
OOK.
OEK SOUND.
Yeah, that is, I've been using that a lot lately. It's great on vocals or anything that's really strident. It's awesome.
It gets a lot of shout outs on the show. So
yeah,
I haven't used it yet, but it's time.
I think I discovered it late. There was at one point where like 3 engineers had just recommended it to me. It's just like, all right, I'll get it.
Yeah.
It's just like, this is something you can't live without. It's like, make anything to make our job easier instead of notching out little, EQ things or automating stuff. Why not just have one plugin on there and just turn the knob up till it sounds good, and then that's it.
Awesome.
It's like the isotope stuff, it's like we have a lot of power.
So here's a closing question. This one is a hypothetical, but we're going to take the way back studio machine, and you get to go back in time.
Cool.
And find young Jaimeson. Son, you're named after a whiskey. You say, listen, I've come back to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know if you want to get out of this, computer selling store and start making records for a living. If you want to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day, what advice would you go back and give yourself if you could?
I knew this question was coming.
You can't avoid it.
I know.
Ding, 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 ding.
I should know this. I think in my early years, I used to second guess a lot of stuff. Is this good enough? Is it not good enough? And I think it goes back to what Tom Fly had told me, and is this be bold in your work,
Yeah.
Don't second guess it. Like, if it sounds good, it is good. How about that?
I love it, dude. That's one of my favorite ones.
If it sounds good, it is good. Don't question it. If it sounds good to you, then it's good.
And, often we know what sounds good because we can tell.
Because we've listened to enough records that you hear.
And if we think it sounds good one moment and we don't think it sounds good another moment, I think we should just also acknowledge that that's okay.
Yeah, and it is. And that's kind of like this pandemic record that came out. It's just like, it may not be my best work quality-wise of recordings because it was done on iPhones, but for a piece of art, it's just like, it is what it is. I did, I made it way better.
Yeah. Well, it's very cool, man. It's very cool. And I mean, the fact that you pulled off, Won't Get Fooled Again, and it sounds like a blasting rock band, and it was done on iPhones. I'm like, holy shit, man.
Yeah.
So Rockstar is a reminder that we have links to that. The playlist is a YouTube playlist in there with Jaimeson's, some of the works and the videos that you guys made for that record. And there's also a Spotify playlist, so you can go listen to a bunch of the music and check out these cool records that you're making. Where would you like the Rockstars to go check out and learn more about you and your music, Jaimeson? How can they reach out to you to make their next hit record?
Well, you can go right to my website, which is JamesonDurr.com, which the links will be in the show note. I have a unique spelling of my name. It's not spelled like the whiskey. There's an I in there. It's Jaimeson.
That just means I don't know how to spell my whiskeys.
Depends how much you've had. So it's Jaimeson Durr, DURR.com. So you can find everything there. There's social media links there. I'm on Instagram under the same name and Facebook under the same name. So it's easy to find me. And as soon as you go to my website, my phone number is right there. So you can just call me, send me a text, or there's an email contact in there too. And you can email me. I do work on a lot of classic rock, but I welcome, all styles of music. Just recorded a folk country album yesterday that I'm really proud of. So I like to change gears and not just keep rock stuff. I like to do other styles of music too.
Yeah, aren't you also doing some occasional hip hop as well and things like that? Or no?
I do occasionally do that, and I enjoy that because it's different. I like the hip hop because there's not rules. Like you can do like really crazy stuff that you wouldn't necessarily do on a rock record. I feel like there's like the rock thing's kind of got its, there's certain things that you do to kind of get that sound. And with hip hop, like you can be a little more experimental. I think they really push the envelope for creativity and just weird sounds that aren't, drums, guitars, and bass. It's all these weird synths and sounds and stuff. So I like it. And then, the rhythm of the rapping or the vocal, it's a different animal.
Well, dude, thank you so much for being on Recording Studio Rockstars with us. It's been an absolute pleasure. I look forward to meeting you around the studio. I wanted to let you know that you're the second Durr to be on this podcast because Steve Durr was on before.
The inventor of the distressor?
No, that's Dave Durr. That's Dave Durr. Steve Durr is a great studio designer.
That's
very
right.
Cool, very cool guest on the show.
Not a very common name.
No, not at all. But man, great to run into you, and I look forward to meeting you in person. I hope I get to get out to San Francisco and check out your awesome studio out there.
Yeah, when it's not the current pandemic thing, we have studio parties like multiple times a year.
Hell yes, I love studio parties.
Even during we used to have AES here, but that went away. But for whatever event is in San Francisco, hopefully you make it out there and we can hang.
Awesome, dude. Great to meet you. Look forward to meeting you in person.
Likewise.
Thanks for listening to Rockstars. Cheers. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. And if you want more free content from Recording Studio Rockstars, all you have to do is go to rsrockstars.com/email. Again, that's rsrockstars.com/email to enter your name and email, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, podcast updates, and even free gear giveaways for your studio. Just look for the link in the show notes below. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our amazing sponsors who have helped make this episode possible. OWC, Atom Audio, Spectra 1964, Isotope, and JZ Microphones. Remember to use the coupon codes ROCK10 at isotope.com/rockstars for 10% off any plugin purchase, or start your extended 30-day free trial subscription to get access to lots of plugins, and Rockstars at JZ azmic.com for 50% off select Vintage Series mics for a limited time. And remember to visit the Atom Audio YouTube channel for free interviews and masterclasses. And use the coupon code ROCKSTAR for 10% off any course at Recording Studio Rockstars Academy for a limited time. You'll find links to all these wonderful sponsors in the description of this podcast. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko, Braden Stremming, and John Richardson for additional podcast and video production. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.